Next, next. Yeah, so these are sort of more advanced um, builds, and if you want, usually if you want aesthetic, then yeah, you go hard tube. Acrylic and PETG, they're basically a thermoplastic, and what that means is that they become pliable, so bendable, at around 120 degrees. So usually what happens is you buy like a really straight tube of around 50 centimeters, 40 centimeters, and you actually cut it at home yourself, and you use a heat gun to bend it yourself. There's typical tubing sizes, and this is different to the soft tube in that the sizes are actually measured in millimeters, not inches. Um, to a lot of people, straight runs can be very appealing, right? Like straight runs, I mean like these really straight sections of tube. Can remember what we said that soft tube can leach plasticizer in your loop, and that can gunk up your water, right? Well, the good thing about all the hard tubes is that it won't leach any plasticizer, so that's good. But yeah, as you can imagine, it's a bit hard to cut the tube and assemble it and bend it, and it's a bit slightly more expensive. But hey, it's worth it, I guess. Um, One part of, well, if you do end up getting it, one thing that you really need to know is that you have to chamfer the ends before you put in the O-rings. So the O-rings for the hard tube will look like this. So instead of a compression fitting for soft tube, you have this sort of tube that, sorry, you have a fitting that has O-rings. It's like 3 sets of O-rings in this case, all around, and you just slot the tube inside, and you screw in a quote-unquote compression, but it doesn't actually compress the tube in order to gain the tight seal. It actually compresses the O-ring so that it squeezes around the tube and locks in so the water doesn't come out. And that's how hard tube compression fitting works. Like I said, you have to chamfer the tube, right? If you don't chamfer it, then what happens to the O-rings is that you'll shred it, you'll cut it, and so it no longer seals in the water and it starts to leak. Chamfering, as you've probably guessed, is just grinding down the corners. If I can go back to the picture of the pipes, not that one. Yeah, like you buy them like this, right? And they're really sharp, and then you trim down the corners, and then they'll fit into the O-rings very smoothly without cutting them. Hang on, I need to take a screenshot for for the arc thing, for the arc form. Um, yeah, so oh yeah, that's a good question. You use this device. So this is called a chamfer, as the name suggests. You you just you just stick in the tube vertically, and then you just rub it around. Like you know how like in the woods you start fire by rubbing a stick on into a block of wood. Just same similar sort of motion. Um, However, for my first build, I actually used a Dremel to chamfer. Um, Unless you have really steady hands, I don't recommend it because it's this will give you a perfect 45-degree angle, but you'll get wonka-tated angles and uneven edges if you do it, and if you have shaky hands. um, well, this slide is here, so you can read later. This is how you bend acrylic tubes. So basically, you actually put in a silicon insert, and you have to buy a piece of silicon tube, which is not hollow but solid on the inside, but it's bendy. You stick it in, and what it does is prevent kinks when you bend it, and then you use a heat gun and you bend it slowly. Um, this would have been great to demonstrate in an in-person workshop next year. I promise that we'll do this next year. I'll bring in a tube and I'll heat it up and I'll show you how you do it. But this is for reference. Here's something interesting. Um, Borosilicate tubing is also another form of hard tubing, which is transparent. Uh, Anyone know what borosilicate occurs in? That's right. It's in the laboratory glasses. So Pyrex is actually made of borosilicate. And so as you can sort of guess, it's corrosion and stain proof, and it can tolerate really hot liquids. Like it tolerates heat shock. So normal glass would just shatter. Um, but unfortunately, um, you actually can't bend it because the melting point is over 500 degrees Celsius. Well, unless if you have like a, a blowtorch, but anyways, that's outside the scope. It's as a result, it's sold in pre-bent segments. So it's sort of an interesting thing where you have to buy like pre-bent 90 degrees or 135 degree segments. Um, I think this is kind of niche because most of the time, I don't think you'll be able to accommodate also like all the pre-bent shapes in your loop. You need you need a wider variety of shapes. But anyways, it's interesting to know that it exists. Okay, now we go into hard tubing, copper chrome. For those of you who've seen Jimmy's build, so Jimmy was the first co-president of PCSOC. His one is a copper chrome build, but his one actually looked like this one because he chrome plated it. If you just use copper pipes, it will look like this, and it looks really, really cool in a steampunk build, or maybe a wooden build actually, um, complete with Noctua fans. You know, um, these are similar principle to how you'd use how you would process the plastic clear tubing, but except the pipes are bent while cold. You don't have to heat it up because heating them up does nothing because it's just metal, right? Um, Instead, what you do is actually you fill the tube with sand and you bend it around um, a bending guide. So you can buy all sorts of bending guides. I might show you after the workshop um, that help you that guide the pipe around a 45 or 90 degree bend. Yet again, the ends must be chamfered because, well, metal, you know, if you say plastic edges can strip the O-rings, well, metal edges can, well, they'll kill it, right? Um, yeah. So what Jimmy did he bought like these long copper tubes, which are like sort of like 1 meter or 2 meters, I think, in length, and he got the fittings that were necessary for them. I think, and I believe they were actually custom made. So that was why his PC cost 10K. But he did this really cool thing where he actually phoned up some supplier in Sydney who actually does electroplating services. And what they do is that they just immerse the tube into a bath of of chrome ions, and it just ends up with this really, really nice shine. Um, so I don't think it's that expensive actually. It might look really fancy, but it's actually not. The good thing about copper chrome tubing is that it's extremely, extremely sturdy. Like think about like which which would you rather move to a like let's say a LAN party or to and from uni for some reason or another? Would you move this sort of case, or would you move, you know, this sort of thing, or would you move that? You know, I think I think that this would be the easy, this would be the safest to move because almost nothing will move, and then the second best would be soft tubing. Air cooling, gang, yes. Alternatively, you can air cool, but like I said, you know, air cooling means you can't cool your GPU to those really, really low 30 degree, 40 degree temperatures. So up until now, you're probably asking, well, how does how do fittings even work? How do I connect the tubes to water blocks? It's via the fittings, right, which I've said before. But these fittings actually screw into the water blocks like this. So if I, ooh, it's lagging. So these fittings will have these standardized what we call G1/4 threads, which means that if you buy any old fitting from, let's say, PC Case Gear or EK, or even from China, then they'll guarantee to fit into these holes, no matter what combination of water block and fitting you have, because they're all G1/4. There are alternatives which, one of which is a quarter NPSM, but it's extremely rare. You hardly ever get this. Bottom line is that you don't have to worry about what whether the fitting actually screws well into the water block because it's all standardized. Um, that being said, G1 quarter is referring to the threads here, and stuff like 3/8 ID is referring to these soft tube sizes, so you don't get them mixed up, even though they're both fractions. Fittings is probably the most expensive part of a water cooling build, and you need to really be careful or you just blow your budget. Like fittings themselves, like these little things, like they'll cost like $5 each on PC case gear, $5 to $8 each, depending on what brand you buy. And you think about it, right? If you had this computer, right, how many fittings are you using? Using one, two. So each water block needs an inlet and an outlet, right? So you have two fittings per water block and two fittings per radiator and so on. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay, so what's 12 times 8? That's already $96. So that's already almost $100 in fittings. And you still haven't accounted for the fact that sometimes you need these special angled fittings or quick disconnects or stop fittings. And they are a little more expensive than these typical compression fittings. So, well, in general, we say cheap, try to go the cheapest, but don't cheap out. In that, like, if you're using a soft tubing, don't use this. This is called a barb with a clip. We don't use this anymore. We use compression fittings for a more secure lock. It stops the if you pull on the tube, the compression will stop it from sliding out. For hard tube fittings, yeah, we already talked about that. Sometimes you might see these pneumatic fittings. These are special fittings in which they actually have teeth that lock in the tube. They bite down on it when it's subjected to a pulling force. Do you get fittings from plumbing stores? No, fittings from plumbing stores will almost always be wrong. You have to get it from EK or I'll tell you. You have to get it from EK Water Blocks or Alpha Core, Bits Power, or from China. So PC case gear, Frozen mod. I'll actually type it in the chat. PC case gear, EK shop, Frozen mod, Aqua Tuning. Yeah, these are all websites which are sort of the retail outlets for all of these brands. Yeah. Yeah, so don't go to a plumber store because you won't find what you're looking for. So use good quality fittings, but try to go for the cheapest without sacrificing on the quality. So as a result, we recommend these brands. But actually for some simple fittings, you can actually get them from China. For example, a fitting which normally costs like $5 here would cost only $2 to $3, even $1 from China, and that goes a really long way to cutting down this sort of budget blowout. Sometimes if you need like more premium for like complicated fittings such as quick disconnects, this is a quick disconnect. You might not want to go a Chinese brand because sometimes the Chinese brands, if they have like mechanical parts or electrical parts, they break easily. But if it's just a block of metal, what can go wrong? But for complicated fittings, you go premium like Swiftech or even like Jimmy, hyper premium, custom fittings, just designed for your use case. Most of you won't use this, so I won't talk about it. Here's something which is a meme, but it's true. You have to buy Chinese components if you want to get your costs down to really, really crazy cheap levels. This is actually from Fish. Some of you may know him as Vincent. He's the electrical engineering dude. This is a Taobao block. This is a Taobao water block, and I hope that everyone can agree that it looks pretty nice. And guess how much this costs? This only costs $25. Usually this will cost you around $100 from EK, maybe even more. Um, this is a CPU block, and the same goes for GPU blocks as well. Like, the price is like often a quarter of the amount you pay for the premium, and the same quality. There isn't really anything, there isn't much that can go wrong if this is not made well, because like when you if it's wrong, then when you do your initial leak testing, then it will fail straight away and you can just return it. Um, but yeah, so that's for water blocks. But obviously for pumps, that need to run 24/7, and they're electrical components. Quick disconnects, radiators. Sometimes, actually, a lot of the time, if you buy a radiator from Taobao, it's probably made of aluminium, and that can corrode your loop because most water blocks are copper. Um, Another scenario in which it's not advised to go Chinese is if the price difference is minimal. If you can get it for $5 here, but Taobao is like $4, then it's not worth it. And plus the shipping cost as well. Yeah, so for water blocks, simple fittings, pump tops, and tubing, go Chinese because they're really great, cheap. So a lot of people will be like, well, but I don't know Chinese. Here you go, I teach you Chinese, right? Just copy and paste all of these. Alternatively, you get someone else to buy the item for you. Actually, Taobao agents are a thing. If you don't want to do it yourself, I think it's when you pay someone to order from Taobao for you. Alternatively, get Fish to order for you because we know how to do it. Yeah, here is a page from FreezeMod, which sells PETG tubing. Um, and well, even if you don't know Chinese, you can still kind of tell that it's 8 to 12, um, 8, 8 ID, 8 inner diameter, 12 outer diameter, or 10 inner, 14 outer, and so on. And you can pick the options. Yeah, you can do it yourself. There's nothing stopping you. And like you just have to find a seller with a good rating, and usually a lot of them have really good ratings. Okay, moving along. For one of the most important components of a water cooling loop is the reservoir. Some of you might be wondering, well, what is it and why do you need it? Well, reservoir stores water, and it basically acts as an on-demand reserve for water. So when you first fill up a loop, right? So here's the pump. It's a bit obscure, but this is the pump. This is the reservoir. You fill up the reservoir because the pump needs water to pump water through. It can't. You cannot pump air through a pump. It will just generate no water pressure. So that's why you need a reservoir. And plus, there will be a lot of air bubbles when you first buy a water block or a radiator from let's say PCK skier, it's not going to be filled with water, right? It's going to be completely empty. It's going to be dry. And when the water passes through, it's not going to push all the air straight out of the reservoir because the air will always want to go up. So, for example, when you fill up this loop, the water will go up, but it won't push the air bubbles down. The air bubbles will stay at the top of the of the radiator like this, and it only takes a long time running the water through the whole system, like let's say 1 to 2 days before all of the air gets pushed out and into the reservoir. And in the process, it consumes water because the water level will go down. Because water is consumed to replace the air bubbles in the process. This is called bleeding. It's the process of pushing air bubbles out of the loop. Also, coolant will always evaporate over time, and so if you don't have a reservoir, then you'll start having air bubbles in your loop. Let's say you didn't have this at all. You just had pure tubing going to tubing. Yeah, it's not a thing, and you shouldn't. No one ever does that. Everyone has a reservoir. Um, Yes, the bad thing about having air in your tubing is that it will reach the pump and the pump will die because the pump without water, if you have too much air, then the pump will actually make this horrible grinding sound, like, and that's when you know it's dying. And pumps are like $100, $200 each, so you don't want that happening. Um, Reservoir is actually pretty important. Usually it's just like an acrylic cylinder with a few ports for water, but you actually have to buy a decent quality. So sometimes you have to be careful with Chinese reservoirs. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. You have to consider what kind of ports you want and where you want the ports to be. How many port, um, like for example, do you want to have the top as an inlet? So for example, in this case, the water is going down into the pump. That's all well and good, but when it goes back to the reservoir, this person has planned for the water to go down into here. So that may not always be possible. You need a special reservoir, in this case a reservoir which has this tube in the middle that actually catches the water from the top and allows it to flow all the way down. Because it's just for purely mechanical reasons. Because if you fill from the top, then it will just splash all over the place. Um, One thing to note that is that these types of reservoirs we do not recommend because they actually crack very easily in practice. That's because the acrylic is can you see like the acrylic is undergoing like a 90-degree turns, 90-degree bends everywhere. Um, these have these result in extra points of stress, hence fracture over time, because um, because acrylic's just not meant to be like in a rigid rectangular shape like this. In a circular shape, um, the stress on the acrylic due to bending is just distributed evenly, and when it expands due to heat from your CPU, which always happen, um, the cracks will not be concentrated and all in one spot. It will just be spread out. Yeah. So yeah, choose your reservoir wisely. And finally, onto coolant choice. So coolant, what's the criteria for ideal coolant? It's supposed to avoid clogging and biological growth, efficiently carry heat away from your water block, and it's supposed to look nice. Um, Here are the top choices of, well, usually people use distilled water. Actually, everyone uses distilled water, and I'll show you in a second. Um, People also put additives, so they put a coil of elemental silver, just a metal, pure silver, in a spiral shape into the reservoir, and that will kill all the germs. Also, you can use um, a chemical biocide. A few drops of PT nuke, which is a clear substance, will actually prevent anything from growing in your water, or just coolant, um, which is something I'll show you soon. It turns out that water is actually the best coolant you can ever go. There isn't anything better than water. Um, the criteria for coolant is defined by two parameters. The kappa value, which the higher the kappa value, the faster the heat transfers from the water block to the coolant, such as water. And also heat capacity. Um, it, this is a measure of the amount of energy required to heat up the water or whatever coolant you have. The higher the heat capacity, the less the temperature of the coolant will change when you heat up the water. So here you have a table comparing the kappa and C values. So let's say for air, right? So air has much lower thermal conductivity than water. So that's why air coolers are generally less efficient for the same amount of volume that flows through the heatsink. But for heat capacity, water has much higher. So it means that um, you know you run a CPU um, at a, with a stress test, and the air will heat up, let's say 20 degrees, but with water it will heat up only 5 degrees. that's because water has a high heat capacity. Compared to metals like copper, obviously, the thermal conductivity of water is much lower, but copper can't flow. As a as a liquid that can flow, it is very good in both heat capacity and thermal conductivity. In fact, it's probably one of the highest in both. It is the highest of almost every known substance in heat capacity. So this is a very long-winded justification of why water is the best, and you can't go better than water. Yes, so distilled water. Use distilled water. Don't use tap water because that contains ions, and that's electrically conductive, and that will cause corrosion. Yeah, we talked about this. Additives. Um, there are two types of additives that people add to the loop. So we talked about biocides, right? So they kill bacteria and fungi. Um, a lot of the time, you see these propylene glycol, ethylene glycol. These are just antifreeze components. This happens to be toxic to humans. These are usually, I don't think they are anymore, but they used to be found in all-in-one coolers. That's why you don't open up your AIO. Also, corrosion inhibitors. For example, EK Cryofill, which I use personally, contains this compound. And what it does is that if the water block starts corroding for some reason or another, it will react with this compound, and it will form a protective coating that stops further corrosion. And one example of a coolant is Mayhem's Aurora. As you can see, it's like sort of it sort of has this, swirly, pearly color. Or you can have just like clear red coolant, or you can just have clear, no color coolant. That's a thing as well. So this is just purely aesthetic. One thing that I really have to stress: don't use alcohol on acrylic. Don't touch alcohol with acrylic. If your reservoir gets, dirty for whatever reason or another, use detergent or soap with water. Don't use alcohol because it reacts with the acrylic and cracks it. And so, yeah, those are all the components of water cooling. So in summary, you know all the components, now put them together. Always draft plans, plan your dream, execute it well. Have it checked by multiple people to see if you haven't done anything completely stupid and won't actually work in the real world before you buy your components. Do good record keeping. Make sure your case has enough slots for the fans and radiators, and be very aware that and be very careful because not all configurations are possible, such as the pump cannot be above the reservoir because the pump will just run on air because the water won't reach it. Water must flow from reservoir to pump, not the other way around, because the reservoir shouldn't get hot because it might crack it. Push-pull radiator setups may be too chunky, so what I mean by that is fans on both sides of the radiators pointing in the same direction. So this is a push-pull because you have a fan, the top fans pull out and the bottom fans push in. Sometimes if the case might not let you because it might be blocked by like the RAM slots or something, so be aware of that. Never mix metals in a loop. That's why you have to be very careful not to get any aluminium in your loop. That being said, if you know what you're doing, then obviously you wouldn't be listening to this. And yeah, don't mix coolants together. Like don't mix this red coolant with like this Aurora coolant, because it will actually, sometimes they might precipitate and that will block up your loop. That's really bad. And yeah, I promised my absolutely beautiful picture of my water cooling setup in progress. This These are just, this is a section that goes inside my server. So this is a PCI bracket that allows the water to go through into the server. This is my RAID card water block. These are my 4 CPU water blocks. This is my GPU universal water block. And I use 2 pumps for redundancy. I managed to get these D5s really cheap. Like this was only 20 bucks. This was full price, so it's like 120. But yeah, still good. in terms of average price. This is funny because this is a Taobao pump. I told you not to buy Taobao pumps. Don't buy them. I actually only bought this for fun. It's like 30 bucks, and this is a Liang DDC, which is normally really expensive. Um, I actually wanted to use this for like a hydroponic plant setup, but that's a story for another day. And with this, I want to show you some really cool builds. People have done it really well. So Fish, well, he knows the stuff. Um, this is all taken from Showcase. He's got his GPU block, CPU block, and this is actually a very special kind of reservoir. It's not really a reservoir. It's called a distro plate, and what it is just it's just an all-in-one. The pump slots directly into the distro plate, and um, the plate is anchored somehow to the side of the PC, just for like a neater looking build instead of like just this random reservoir in the middle, right? And I think this connects directly to the GPU, so um, it makes for less tubing to be required in the build. So distro plates are nice. It's a modern 2021 thing. 2020, 21. Yeah, it's great. For Chaos the Fallen, I actually went back on this today and I was like, oh my gosh, I should have given the best build price to them. But yeah, there's always next year. This is no compromises build, like legit, like it's like top of the line components, right? And RTX 3090, yay, they actually got the hands on one. Congratulations. Um, they've used acrylic hard tubing here. As you can see, they have a distro plate as well. I can't see the pump, but it should be down here somewhere. It looks like it's down here. It's just obscured by the edge of the PC. But yet again, GPU water block, CPU water block. Really, really nice straight runs all the way there. And they've used EK Cryofuel Clear, which is a coolant which is colorless and clear. And yeah, Eco Cryofuel is pretty good because it's a biocide and anti-corrosion substance all in one. I use that. It's great. For my server thing, I'm planning to use a UV reactant version of this, of Eco Cryofuel. It's blue, and I'm gonna put like UV lights in my server so that if there's ever a leak, then I can see it straight away. Not sure how useful that is, but yeah, that's all. Next workshop. Oh, drum roll. Next workshop will be quantum computing, which is our very first extreme workshop for the year. And our very, very first computing workshop that PCSOC has ever done. This will be in collaboration with QSOC. As you see, these cute symbols here. These are representative of the. This is a love child, right? Between QSOC and PCSOC. I will teach you all the basics, and and will take over for the second hour. So it's a 2-hour workshop, and by the time we're done, you would be able to program a quantum computer in under 2 hours. So it's a bit ambitious, right? Yeah, I hope you're up for it. But the good thing is that you only need first year maths, and it's hands-on. And I'll be there the whole time if you have trouble with the maths or whatever. You all you need is like a lot of knowledge of matrices and linear algebra, and that's it. Like it's really simple. You'll be like, what is this? Like, what is quantum computing after this? Um, I've only done 1041. If I'm not sure if 1041 has vec linear algebra, like um matrices, vectors. Um, Matrices are good. Matrices are life. Yeah. So I guarantee you that it will be worth it. You'll walk out with a lot of confidence if you are doing a quantum computing degree to some extent. Will, did you have anything to say about this? Mm. Is 104, does 141 have linear algebra? Is that a 1A or a 1B subject? Oh. Oh, statistics. Yeah. As as long as you've learnt matrices and vectors. Yeah. Yeah. Well, worst comes to worst, I can just I well I'm already teaching and going through the maths during the workshop. Worst comes to worst, you know, after I'm done and it's hands-on time, it's more like it's also a time for people to go, well, I didn't understand what you were saying um, in the previous section, so can you explain again? And I'll just go around helping people. Free course content. Yes. Yes, and I'm not even getting paid to do this. I just want people to know how to how to do quantum computing. Yeah, and if we have enough interest, then we'll actually I'll create a quantum summer squad where people where we can just all study quantum. Maybe. Next minute, like perfect error correction. All. Oh wow, that would be pretty cool. But probably not. um, I think that it would be really great. Like even if people don't end up like even if people don't end up being coming back, keep on coming back and be like, you know, I want to learn more. I want to learn more. Like at least for those who do quantum related subjects, like things that involve quantum computing somewhere along the track, they would have looked. By the time they're in third year, they would look at it and be like, dude, this is easy. I learned it in first year. Like, it's really interesting because like quantum computing isn't often taught is often taught in like third, fourth year. Like you have to like go through all of this like all of this prerequisite physics. You have to learn all of the like all the classical electrodynamics and um, um, theory behind quantum. I don't know what you have to learn. Like solid state physics. I'm pretty sure before you get to quantum computing. Like obviously like it will be you'll understand more, but to actually program a quantum computer and understand just the gist of how the physics works, you don't need that. It's actually pretty crazy once you realize. So yeah, stay tuned. Hope you'll come back for the workshop. Any questions? Oh, I think people have been typing before. Presenter talking about material science and fluid dynamics. I mean, I mean, it. I mean, we are going to talk about quantum computing. So if you thought that was hard, why don't you see this? No, actually, quantum computing is probably going to be even easier than this. Yeah, thank you for coming. We're going to have movie night like 7 p.m. right now with Black Widow. Gonna have to rename the channel. Please sign the ARC form. Yes, please sign the ARC form. Please sign the 2 ARC forms. We have one for movie night and one for workshop. Please sign the ARC form. Please sign ARC form 2. For water cooling, wouldn't you first screw in the water box? Um, and then add piping to and from it or something. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so you just put you put the water blocks in position um, onto your GPU, CPU, whatever, RAM, wherever you want it to go. just so you have an indication of how the tubing should run in your case. Yeah, you should always do that. And this is especially the case for hard tubing, because you need to know exactly where to bend it, that's why. Okay, I'm taking a screenshot. Great. Wasn't it that photo the water blocks were not screwed in? Oh, my photo. Yeah, I put the water. I put when I was changing over my CPUs last week, I already put the water blocks in position, and I cut all the tubing and I fitted them all together before taking them out again, because I need to use my server in the meantime. Um, so yeah, that's how I sort of test the loop outside of the server before I put it in. Yeah. I just need to check for leaks because well, one leak and my server's like dead. Pray for me. Yeah. Um, People coming for Black Widow. Or maybe I shouldn't have pinged that early. I didn't know when we'd finish today. I don't know. Any other questions? Feel free to just spam me. Black Widow happening now. Hello. Do you like my beautiful water cooling? this, this is not mine. This is not mine. This is mine. um, I was gonna ask you something, but I forgot. Oh, what? Velocity. Oh. Oh, okay, I don't understand. I don't know what a Monty Python is.